She thought she was just cleaning out her deceased uncle's house, but instead, she uncovered a secret he had been hiding for 30 years. Nighttime footsteps under the windows, broken locks, hidden tapes, and a man the family considered a friend. Watch this video to the end. The truth she found is more dangerous than you think. Like, subscribe, and write in the comments where you are watching from. Rain fell in thin, unwavering lines that blurred the world into a gray watercolor, softening edges, muting shapes, and turning the cemetery into a silent field of trembling umbrellas. No one spoke. The air was cold enough that every breath drifted white, dissolving into the mist before it reached the ground. A handful of relatives huddled near the open grave, listening to the priest's voice fading into the steady hum of wind. When the final clump of earth struck the coffin, the sound felt heavier than it should have been, less like a burial, and more like the lid sealing over something unfinished. Mia stood slightly apart from the others, her black coat damp at the shoulders, her hair sticking to her cheekbones as rain trailed down her skin. She wasn't crying, not exactly, but an ache settled inside her chest like a quiet bruise, a hollow feeling she couldn't name. Her Uncle Harold had never been close to anyone, not family, not neighbors, not friends he once had. He lived behind drawn blinds and locked doors. Yet the emptiness he left behind felt wrong, as if something weighty had been removed from the fragile balance of their lives. Her mother, Karen, stood beside her with a tissue crumpled in her hand, her eyes red from both weather and emotion. She whispered almost to herself, "He didn't deserve to die alone." Mia nodded, though she was unsure if she agreed. Harold had chosen his solitude. Everyone knew that. He appeared at family gatherings rarely and always silently, offering faint smiles that never reached his eyes, watching conversations from a distance, listening more than he spoke, retreating the moment dinner ended. When the funeral ended, the small crowd drifted to their cars, tires sinking in the mud as they disappeared through the iron gate. The cemetery emptied quickly, leaving behind only the fresh mound of earth and the rain whispering through bare branches. The drive home took them past the edge of town, where houses thinned and hills rose like dark shapes beneath the fog. Even through the haze, Harold's property was unmistakable. The sagging fence leaned toward the road. The oak trees bent over the roof like guardians or warnings, and farther back, barely visible through the mist, stood the old garage. Its metal door rusted but firm, its presence impossible to ignore. Mia stared at it as they pulled into the driveway. As a child, she had always been drawn to that garage, imagining treasures, inventions, or secrets hidden inside. She used to run toward it the moment they arrived, trying to peek through dusty windows. But her uncle's sharp voice always cut her off. "Stay out of there, Mia. That's not for you." The tone had never been angry, just edged with something like fear. Inside the house, the stale air hit them immediately. Dust, oil, and something faintly metallic lingered in every room. The living room resembled a time capsule, stacks of newspapers piled unevenly, a half-filled cup of old coffee on the counter, an outdated calendar still turned to last year. Nothing had been touched for months, maybe longer. Photographs lined the hallway walls. Harold in his 20s beside an old film camera. Harold by a lake with men she didn't recognize. Harold in a factory uniform standing stiff and uneasy. In every picture, he looked the same, eyes focused not on the lens, but past it, on something invisible to the rest of them. As Mia walked deeper into the house, she felt the quiet pressing in. Her footsteps echoed softly across wooden floors, stirring dust motes floating like pale ghosts in the thin light that seeped through curtains. She turned into the narrow hallway leading to the garage and froze. A heavy padlock hung from the latch. It was thick with rust, but unbroken. The door itself was darker than the rest of the house's solid oak, stained by time and weather, and cold air seemed to seep through the cracks around its frame. Karen approached from behind. "Leave that for later," she said quickly. "I don't want to deal with it today." "He never let anyone inside, did he?" Mia asked quietly. Karen shook her head. "Not even your father. He said he was working on something important, but he never explained what. After his wife left, he grew even worse. Sometimes he wouldn't answer my calls for weeks. Then he'd show up at my door with some broken radio, acting like nothing was wrong." She sighed. "Whatever's in there, I'm not ready for it." The rest of the day blurred into slow, exhausting work sorting boxes of papers, carrying old clothes to the dining room, throwing out stacks of junk mail. As hours passed, the house seemed to sink deeper into itself. The rain returned, tapping against the roof in a constant rhythm. Lights flickered once, then stabilized. But no matter how much she tried to focus, Mia's gaze kept drifting toward the locked garage door. Something about it felt alive, waiting, breathing, holding its secrets with a quiet, desperate grip. By evening, fatigue settled into their bones. Karen suggested staying the night instead of driving back through the storm. The electricity still worked barely, and they found a box of old candles in a drawer. They ate canned soup in silence. The candle flames wavered in the dim kitchen, casting long shadows across the walls. Karen spoke first. "He used to keep notebooks," she said, staring into the flickering light. "He wrote everything down. Once I asked what he was working on, and he said, 'Truth takes time to ripen.' I thought he was just being poetic." Later, Karen went upstairs to rest. Mia remained downstairs, sitting beside the window that faced the garage. The wind rattled the branches outside. Darkness coated the yard, but she could still make out the faint outline of the garage door. She tried to tell herself the unease was just grief, just nerves, just imagination. But then the clock struck midnight. Metal clinked softly. Mia's breath caught. The sound came again, sharp, distinct, metal against metal. She moved to the window, brushing aside the thin curtain. Through the rain, she saw the padlock swinging gently. It shouldn't have been moving. The wind had died hours ago. Then, just for a second, a glimmer of light swept behind the fence. A flashlight. Then darkness again. Her body moved before her mind caught up. She opened the front door and stepped onto the porch. Cold rain hit her face. The yard was silent. No cars on the road. No footsteps. No voices. Only rain and her pounding heartbeat. She walked toward the garage, shoes sinking into the mud. When she touched the padlock, it swung open with a soft click. Someone had already turned the key. Her throat tightened. She turned slowly toward the house. Every window was dark, except the one where her mother slept. Her eyes dropped to her hand and the padlock hanging open. Without thinking, she closed it again, and when she pulled her hand away, the key was in her pocket. She didn't remember taking it, didn't remember touching it. She only felt its cold weight against her palm, heavy and inexplicable. She backed away from the garage, refusing to look at it again. Inside, the house creaked softly. Upstairs, Karen shifted in her sleep. Mia shut the curtains tightly, sat on the edge of her bed, and listened to the rain until her eyes grew heavy. But before sleep took her, one thought wouldn't let go. Someone had been there. Someone had wanted inside the garage, and whatever they were looking for, they believed Harold had died before it could be found. Morning arrived muted and colorless, as if the world had been drained while they slept. Mia opened her eyes to the faint sound of dripping somewhere in the kitchen and the hollow stillness of a house that hadn't known company in years. For a moment, she wondered if the events of the night had been just a dream. The shifting lock, the swing of the padlock, the flash of light behind the fence. But when she slipped her hand into the pocket of her jeans, her fingers brushed cold metal. The key. Real? Heavy. Impossible to ignore. She closed her fist around it, her pulse quickening. Downstairs, Karen was already awake, humming softly as she rummaged through a box. The sound felt strangely out of place in the silence of the old house. "Morning?" her mother said without looking up. "Did you sleep?" Mia nodded, though the tremor in her chest said otherwise. "Yeah, you?" "Barely," Karen admitted. "This place, it's unsettling. But let's keep moving. One room at a time. The sooner we're done, the sooner we can leave." Mia nodded again, but her gaze drifted toward the hallway, the dark stretch of floor that led to the locked door. She felt it again, that quiet pull, as though the air itself leaned in that direction. By mid-morning, Karen went upstairs to tackle the bedrooms, leaving Mia alone on the first floor. The sounds of her mother's footsteps faded. The house creaked. The rain tapered to a thin drizzle, then stopped. The key grew warm in her pocket. She hesitated only a moment before stepping toward the garage door. The padlock opened with a soft metallic click, almost too easy, as if the lock itself wanted to be undone. She pulled the door. It moved slowly, resisting her first push, then groaning open like something waking from a long sleep. The smell hit her first dust, old film, the faint tang of oil. The air was colder than the rest of the house, untouched for years. As her eyes adjusted, her breath caught. The garage was nothing like she had imagined. No scattered tools, no chaotic piles. Instead, everything was arranged with unnatural precision. Metal shelves lined the back wall, each filled with rows and rows of VHS tapes, hundreds of them, maybe thousands, all labeled by year, place, or something more cryptic: factory night shift, riverbank, parade, restricted access, old bridge, after midnight. Not family memories, not home movies. Records of something. Cardboard boxes were stacked neatly, filled with yellowed notebooks. Tools were organized like surgical instruments across a wooden workbench. And beneath a small window sat an old TV and VCR, plugged into the wall, though the wiring looked decades old. The faint red glow of a power light stared at her like an unblinking eye. She stepped inside slowly. The floorboards creaked softly beneath her shoes. Dust swirled in thin beams of sunlight pushing through the window, turning the air into something almost solid. She reached for one of the tapes, Night Delivery, restricted, and ran her fingers over the spined label. Every letter was written in Harold's tiny, precise handwriting. She set the tape back and scanned the shelves again. He had spent years collecting these, years watching, recording, documenting. But why? A glint above the workbench caught her eye, She reached up and felt a cassette lying flat, apart from the others. It had no case and no printed label, just a rough, handwritten message in thick, shaky ink. Watch only after my death. Wash my cannon. She froze. The handwriting was familiar. She had seen it on his old grocery lists, on birthday cards he mailed late every year, even on the half-smudged notes stuck on his refrigerator. It was Harold's. But the tone, the urgency, she had never seen that from him. Her pulse hammered. The room suddenly felt smaller, the air heavier. Mia? Are you in there? She nearly dropped the tape. Karen's voice echoed from the doorway. Her mother peered into the dim room, squinting at the shelves, wrapping her arms around herself as if the cold reached into her bones. I told him to get rid of all this junk, Karen said softly. He never listened. Cameras, tapes, clippings. He said he was recording things that mattered. I always thought it was part of his loneliness. Mia swallowed hard and hid the tape behind her back. I was just looking, she said. Karen shook her head, scanning the rows. He started collecting this stuff after his wife left. Said he had work to finish. I never understood it. I don't think anyone did. Her mother shivered and stepped back. Come inside. We'll deal with this later. It's freezing. As soon as Karen turned away, Mia slid the tape deep into her pocket and followed her out. But the plastic edges pressed insistently against her leg, as if demanding attention. All afternoon, as they packed dishes and sorted papers, her thoughts returned to the hidden message scrawled across the cassette. The phrase wouldn't leave her mind. Watch only after my death. What did he want her to see? When evening came, Karen went upstairs to rest. Mia stayed downstairs under the pretense of finishing paperwork, though her eyes kept drifting toward the old TV beside boxes of Harold's things. The house settled into silence. The lights flickered once, then again. She picked up the tape. Her heart pounded. She slid it into the VCR. The machine hummed, then whirred softly. The screen flickered with static before stabilizing into an image. Uncle Harold sat before the camera, the dim light of a lamp casting shadows under his eyes. His hair was thinner. His face looked older than she remembered, drawn, tired, frightened. He leaned closer, staring directly into the lens. If you're watching this, I'm gone. Mia's breath hitched. His voice sounded steady, but under it she heard something strained, fear or exhaustion she didn't understand. I don't know who found this, he continued, but if it's you, Mia, listen carefully. He paused, glancing over his shoulder as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows behind him. The truth has a cost, and it's buried deep. I've hidden things in this house you won't understand, not yet, but I kept them for a reason. Static crackled. The image wavered. They were watching, he whispered. She leaned forward, her heartbeat thudding in her ears. It started 30 years ago. A mistake that turned into a crime, and The tape sputtered, rewound itself a second, then snapped into a freeze frame of Harold's face, eyes wide, mouth half open, as if the sentence had stuck in his throat. Then darkness. Mia stared, frozen. The silence in the room pressed against her. She reached for the remote. The VCR clicked on its own. The tape whirred again, without her touching anything. The screen flashed white. A shape, just a faint outline, appeared behind Harold on the frozen frame, half hidden by the shelves. A person, watching him. The tape cut to black. Mia's body went cold. She sat for a long moment, unable to breathe. The hum of the machine lingered in the quiet, like the echo of someone whispering just behind her ear. She turned off the TV and slipped the cassette back into her pocket with trembling fingers. Her legs felt weak as she crossed the room. She blew out the candle on the table, plunging the room into darkness. Her uncle's final words looped inside her skull. "Now, the truth belongs to you." She climbed the stairs, her heart pounding, and paused at the top. Through the window, she saw the yard, still and black, beneath the fading rain. Then, a flashlight blinked once, then vanished behind the fence. The morning arrived without sunlight, wrapped in a blanket of dull gray clouds that pressed low against the hills. The drizzle from the night before had settled into a cold mist that clung to the windows and blurred the outline of the yard. Mia woke with the uneasy sense that someone had been calling her name in her dreams. Her heart raced before she even opened her eyes. Downstairs, she found Karen sitting at the table in her robe, hands wrapped around a steaming mug. Her face looked pale in the dim kitchen light. "You're up early again?" Karen said, forcing a smile. "I couldn't sleep." "This house?" Karen exhaled softly. "It's getting under my skin." Mia nodded but didn't answer. Her mind kept replaying the tape, the unfinished confession, the shape behind Harold, the way the machine had moved as if controlled by something unseen. She wondered if she should tell her mother, but the words lodged in her throat, heavy with doubt. Before she could speak, Karen added, "I dreamed about your uncle last night. He was standing at the garage, saying something I couldn't hear." Mia's fingers tightened around her cup. Did he look upset? No, just tired, like he wanted to warn me about something. Karen rubbed her temples. It was nothing, just stress. Mia didn't believe that. Not anymore. They went back to sorting through the house. The silence deepened as the morning stretched toward noon. While Karen tackled the upstairs rooms, Mia took to the living room, where piles of paper and boxes still cluttered the floor. As she sifted through a stack of old envelopes, something caught her eye. A wooden chest tucked in the corner, half hidden beneath a blanket. She pulled it open. Inside were neatly labeled folders, some filled with harmless receipts, others with faded letters. But one folder, thicker than the rest, was labeled 1993-1994. Her hands trembled as she opened it. Inside were grainy black and white photographs. A factory floor, a dim staircase, men in hard hats. One picture showed a group of workers gathered around a steel support beam. The back of the photo bore a handwritten note in Harold's careful script. "Night shift, witnessed incident. Don't trust management." Her pulse quickened. She searched deeper and found yellowing clippings from old newspapers, reports of accidents. A worker's injury declared unavoidable. A small article about a missing man last seen near the Ridgewood Steel plant. Ridgewood Steel, the same place Harold had mentioned on the tape. She snapped the folder shut and slipped it into her bag just as Karen called from upstairs. After helping her mother move a heavy box, Mia returned to the living room and stared at the bag, heart throbbing. Whatever happened 30 years ago, Harold had been documenting it, and he had kept it hidden. Later in the afternoon, when Karen lay down to rest, Mia finally returned to the television with the cassette still burning a hole in her pocket. She slid it into the VCR and pressed play. Static. Then Harold's face again, deeper lines etched across his brow. "If you're still watching," he said, "it means you deserve to know the truth." He looked exhausted, like a man carrying a weight too heavy for one lifetime. 30 years ago, I worked at Ridgewood Steel. I was in charge of documenting safety procedures, cameras, logs, just routine surveillance. He paused, rubbing his temples. One night, the system malfunctioned, or so they said. They told me to erase the footage from the East Wing, but I checked it first. The screen flickered. He leaned closer. I saw 3 men go into the restricted area after hours. The foreman, 2 men from the city. They argued with a worker named Reed Young, maybe 20. Reed tried to run. One of the men hit him. He fell down a stairwell. Mia felt her stomach twist. They didn't call for help, Harold said, voice cracking. They dragged him away, told the guard to record it as an accident. His eyes glistened. I made a copy. He shook his head slowly. That was my mistake. He swallowed hard. I tried to take it to the police, but the station chief told me to forget it. He said the men were connected, that the council, the companies, half the town owed them favors. He said if I wanted to keep my wife safe, I'd keep my mouth shut. The screen wavered again. That same night, someone came to my house. They knew I kept a copy. He looked over his shoulder again, breathing shallow. I've been hiding in plain sight ever since, collecting, watching, waiting. Behind him on the tape, glimpses of his garage appeared, papers taped to the walls, maps connected by red string, a collage of decades-long obsession. I couldn't destroy the proof, he said, but I couldn't reveal it while those men still had power. One of them still comes to see your mother. Mia froze. John Holden. Her breath left her in a single sharp gasp. Harold's voice dropped to a whisper. Don't trust him. He was there that night. The screen flickered violently. The tape cut out. Silence filled the room. Mia's hands shook as she pulled the cassette from the player. She felt like she was standing on the edge of a cliff, staring into a truth too dark to absorb all at once. She had grown up with Holden. He had been at every family barbecue, every holiday dinner. He had helped Harold move once. He had brought Karen flowers after her surgery. He had carried Harold's coffin. He couldn't be a murderer. And yet, her uncle had never lied. Suddenly, a sound snapped her back, a crunch of gravel outside. She turned to the window. Through the mist, a shadow moved near the fence, slow, deliberate, as if watching the house. Then it vanished. Her breath hitched. She locked the front door, then the back door, then all the windows she could reach. Upstairs, Karen stirred, oblivious. The house groaned in the settling silence. Mia crouched near the fireplace and pulled up a loose floorboard she had found earlier. She slipped the tape inside and slid the wood back into place. A sudden hum filled the room. The TV flickered once white static, then went black again. Mia stared at her reflection in the dark screen. Something was coming. Something her uncle had feared all his life. Something that had just learned she was watching the tapes. Night settled in slowly, smothering the last light from the sky. Mia climbed the stairs with her heart still pounding. She paused at the top and whispered to herself the truth she could no longer deny. Holden had killed her uncle, and now he was circling back. Night arrived like a curtain falling fast, heavy, and absolute. By the time the last streak of gray faded from the sky, the house was swallowed in darkness deeper than any Mia had felt since they arrived. Wind pressed against the windows with long, rattling breaths, and somewhere far off, a branch snapped like a warning. The old walls creaked as if remembering things they wished they could forget. Karen had gone to bed early, exhausted from sorting through the final boxes in the attic. Her door was closed. Her breathing faintly reached the hallway, a soft, steady rhythm that made the silence everywhere else feel sharper. Mia sat alone at the kitchen table, hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee she had stopped drinking an hour ago. The lamp above her flickered occasionally, its weak bulb fighting to stay alive. Her thoughts spun like gears grinding against each other. Harold's confession, the shape behind him on the tape, the name John Holden, the shadow she had seen near the fence. The feeling of being watched had grown stronger with every passing hour. She reached into her pocket, pulling out the folded note she had found earlier, barely legible beneath smudges, written in Harold's frantic hand. "If they find the evidence, they'll come for you too. Watch the tapes, but only when alone. The truth is buried under the garage." She read the words again, her stomach tightening. Under the garage? She had thought the tapes were the secret. But this note hinted at something far more dangerous, something hidden physically, not just recorded. A sudden thump echoed across the living room. Mia froze. Another thump, closer this time. She stood slowly and moved toward the sound, each heartbeat loud in her ears. The house felt colder, as if the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a breath. She stepped into the living room and strained to hear. Nothing. Then faintly, crunch, 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 gravel outside. Someone walking. She crept toward the window and peeked through the curtains. A figure stood at the edge of the yard. Motionless, tall, wearing a dark coat that blended with the night. She couldn't see his face, but she didn't have to. Holden. Even from a distance, she recognized the squared shoulders, the particular tilt of his head when he surveyed something he believed he owned. Her breath caught painfully in her chest. He took a single step toward the house. Mia backed away. She grabbed her phone. No signal, not even a single bar. The power flickered again. She bolted up the stairs. Her mother opened her door, startled. "Mia, what's wrong?" "He's here." Mia's voice shook. "Holden, outside." Karen's face went pale, color draining instantly. "That's impossible. Why would he?" "I saw him." "Mom, please, we have to hide." But Karen stepped toward the window at the end of the hall, peeking through the glass with trembling fingers. The yard was empty. The fog had thickened, swallowing everything. "He's gone," Karen whispered. "Maybe you imagined." A fist pounded on the front door. Both of them jumped. Another pound. Harder. More deliberate. "Mia. Karen." Holden's voice, cold. Too calm. "Open the door." Karen backed away from the stairs. "We'll call the police." "There's no signal," Mia said, voice cracking. "We need to hide." Another louder pound shook the door in its frame. "Mia," he called again, "we need to talk." Karen's eyes darted to Mia. "Why is he here?" "Uncle Harold left something behind," Mia whispered. "Something he wants." Panic flashed across Karen's face, but she didn't argue. She grabbed Mia's hand and pulled her into Harold's old bedroom. The room smelled like dust and machine oil, the air cold as a cave. Karen locked the door. But the lock was old, flimsy. It wouldn't hold. Mia scanned the room and spotted the loose floorboard she had noticed earlier while sweeping. She dropped to her knees and pried it open with shaking hands. Inside was a narrow cavity filled with bundles of envelopes, old photographs, and a single metal box wrapped in cloth. She pulled the box out. It was heavier than expected, solid enough that her arm strained as she lifted it. The metal felt icy, as if it had been buried in snow. Karen knelt beside her. "What is that?" I don't know, Mia whispered, but Holden does. Downstairs, the front door groaned under a powerful shove. Holden had begun forcing his way in. Karen's voice cracked. What do we do? We run. Where? The garage. Karen stared. Are you insane? That place? He won't follow us there, not if that's where the truth is. The front door splintered. Holden stepped inside. Footsteps shook the floorboards. Karen swallowed hard, grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand, and nodded. They slipped out of the bedroom, moving down the hallway on silent feet. Holden reached the foot of the stairs. Mia, he called softly, like a teacher calling a child. You're making this harder than it needs to be. She and Karen darted down the hall and exited through the back door, slipping into the freezing night. The fog wrapped around them instantly, making it nearly impossible to see more than a few feet ahead. The garage loomed like a dark silhouette through the mist. Hurry, Mia whispered. Karen gripped her hand, stumbling through the wet grass, breath shaking. Behind them, the porch creaked. Holden had followed. They reached the garage, and Mia pulled the door open. They slipped inside and slammed it shut behind them. The darkness swallowed them, thick and heavy. Karen flicked on the flashlight. The beam illuminated the VHS shelves, the old TV, the tapes, and something else. A trap door beneath the workbench, its metal ring faintly visible under the clutter. Mia's chest tightened. Under the garage, she whispered. This is what he meant. Karen knelt beside it and brushed away dust, revealing the full outline of a hatch. Behind them, a silhouette appeared through the garage window, tall, unmoving. Holden, he'd found them, but he didn't try to break in. He stood there, watching, waiting, as if he knew they were exactly where he wanted them. Mia grabbed the metal ring and pulled. The hatch opened with a long metallic groan, exhaling a breath of stale, icy air from the depths below. A ladder descended into darkness. Karen's voice shook. We're not going down there. We have no choice, Mia whispered. Holden's hand pressed against the glass. The window shuddered. Mia climbed onto the ladder. Karen hesitated, then followed her as the trapdoor swung shut above them, plunging them into darkness except for the faint beam of the flashlight. They descended into a narrow concrete corridor where the air smelled of rust and time. Old pipes lined the walls, dripping slowly. At the bottom, the passage opened into a small chamber. On a table in the center sat a dusty metal case, identical to the one Mia pulled from the floorboards above. But this one bore a label. Read. Original footage. Do not destroy. Karen gasped softly. Mia opened the case. Inside was a single tape, marked with the date of the accident 30 years ago. A sound echoed above them, the garage door grinding open. Holden had entered. Karen grabbed Mia's hand. He's coming. But Mia wasn't looking at the ladder. She was staring at the wall across from them, a wall lined with dusty old monitors and a power switch. Harold had built something down here, a fail-safe. A dead man's switch. The power flickered. The machines hummed. Screens glowed to life, illuminating the chamber in a cold blue light. Footsteps thudded on the ladder. Holden was halfway down. Karen whispered, Mia, what do we do? Mia reached toward the switch, her hand trembling. When Holden's shadow filled the opening of the chamber, eyes wild, breath ragged, Mia flipped the switch. The monitors brightened. The tape began to play. The truth filmed, undeniable, horrific filled the screens with the grainy figure of Reed falling, the men dragging him away, the foreman giving orders. Holden froze. The chamber lights flickered, growing brighter. Somewhere above them, police sirens wailed in the distance, growing closer. Harold's system had alerted them the moment the fail-safe was triggered. Mia stared at Holden, finally seeing the fear her uncle had lived with. He wasn't a monster. He was just a man who knew his power was gone. The color drained from his face as the sirens approached, echoing against the hills. Karen squeezed Mia's hand. In the growing brightness of the screens, surrounded by decades of hidden truth, Mia finally understood what Harold had meant. Now the truth belongs to you, and the world would hear it. She went down to the basement room where her uncle hid everything he had feared his entire life, and finally played the very recording that destroyed the lie that had protected the murderer for 30 years. The truth came out, and no one could stop it now. If you liked this story, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and write in the comments how you felt about the ending.